Hi, I'm Robert, and this is the 10,000 Things Zoom for June 9th, 2018. The 10,000 Things is an ancient Chinese term that means the entire manifest world, and the conversation here focuses on the place in that world of this aliveness I call myself. The 10,000 Things is also the title of a book, which since its publication last year has gained readers all over the world. I hear daily from readers, many of whom have said that reading the 10,000 Things ended a search of many years, or capsized their boat, or wiped the slate clean, or was the last book for them on this subject. People have told me that reading the 10,000 Things has changed their lives, blown their minds, or set them free in unexpected ways. Now, as the writer, I know that repeating such praise could seem boastful, but honestly, I don't mean it that way. I just feel delighted and surprised that my words on these matters have touched so many people in ways they find meaningful. If you would like to dip into the 10,000 Things, I will put links to the first few chapters in the description below, along with a link to the book page where these conversations continued and where future Zooms will be announced as well. Now, the purpose of these meetings is to expand upon the basic themes of the book, one of which, perhaps the most important one, is what I call not knowing. Not knowing does not refer to ordinary facts, such as the distance from Earth to the moon. That can be known and is not in dispute except by fools. When I say not knowing, I mean our complete and total ignorance regarding ultimate matters, such as who or what I really am, what happens after death, what I must do to attain enlightenment or salvation, if God exists or not, and other such mysteries. The only way I know to come up with answers to questions like that is by conjecture and speculation, or more bluntly, just making shit up. Making up explanations for the inexplicable, as religion, metaphysics, and spirituality have been doing since time immemorial. It's a great business model for one thing. Explanations sell no matter how scanty the evidence for them. And anyway, we humans seem to love pulling the wool over our own eyes or paying someone to do it for us. Not knowing hardly seems a radical idea, but of all the perspectives in my book, that's the one that gets the hardest pushback. Now, certain religious or philosophical traditions may have nuggets of wisdom mixed in among their bootless claims and conjectures, and perhaps there's value in hearing some of those perspectives, particularly if one is bright enough to avoid glomming on to unsubstantiated claims and conjectures just because they feel good or allay anxiety. But when claims and conjectures are viewed as undisputed facts, as capital T truth, and taught that way, that is what my friend John Troy calls learned ignorance. To be clear, I am saying that no human being, regardless of reputation, knows anything about ultimate matters. Nothing. Zero. Zilch. That is why I prefer to ignore the spiritual teachers, who after all are just human beings like you and me, and standing instead on the ground of my own being, not theirs. Before opening the floor, I'd like to share this poem by the late James Broughton, sent to me last week. Do not ask where we go from here. Nobody knows. Some think they do, but nobody really knows anything about anything. We are only gurgles in the stream, and the stream doesn't know where it's going either. It is just going. It is just going with its nature as far as that will take it. And with its nature, it has to take along a horde of gurgles who are forever asking where they are gurgling to. Everything is going beautifully, nowhere. And with that, I will open the floor to questions and comments. Yes, Paul.
Yeah. There's part of, I've heard you say this in other Zoom recordings, and I read it in your book, about when you speak, the words are just coming. It's not like you're actually saying the words. You're not speaking. You're speaking the words, but they're coming from somewhere. It's kind of a mystery. I mean, I get this with the physical. Like, I'm not controlling my blood flow. I'm not controlling my heartbeat or breathing. It's happening. It just happens. I'm not in charge of that. I guess it's just my mind having a little trouble grokking the idea that, it's just, like when you talk during these meetings, it sounds a lot like Robert. It sounds like a person I have read about and read, and when I speak, it has the color of my personality or whatever. And then there was a time when I started really listening to my words, and it was like 7 or 8 times I spoke, and I could, something kind of tweaked in my head, and I'm going, where are these coming from? I didn't really, I could sense that I wasn't controlling the words, so to speak. But I just wanted to hear you amplify on that a little bit, because it's easy to understand with the breathing. I'm not sitting here controlling my breathing, but the words that come out of my mouth, where are they coming from? If it's not me, so to speak, or me, the personality.
Okay. Well, that goes directly to the question of how you understand who or what I am. So if you want to look at your screen and say, that's Robert, I can see his physical form. It's pretty much the same as it was last time I saw him. The sound of his voice is similar. I've got some laryngitis today, so it's a bit different, but similar. And the kind of things that he says seem to be all of a piece. And you could say that is Robert. And that, in a sense, is true. But the point is that when I look into what Robert is, I can't really put my finger on it. I'm speaking now, but honestly, I have no idea what I'm going to say next. There's not a little Robert in my head that's somehow writing the script and then it comes out. It doesn't work that way. It's just a flow, and I'm not in charge of the flow. Now, there is a way to be in charge of the flow. I was trained to do that in psychotherapy. When speaking with a client, I could rehearse my reply to see if it might have the proper effect, and then either speak it or not. But that's a very limited area. And meanwhile, this entire self is happening unmonitored and uncontrolled. So essentially, there is no little me in the middle of my skull somewhere writing script here. Now, as far as why is Robert one way and Paul is another, these are temporary constructions that really don't have that much staying power. One analogy that I have used is that of a whirlpool. If you are accustomed to walking along a stretch of river, you may know that there's a bend in the river, and right there's a whirlpool. And if you go back tomorrow, the whirlpool will also be there. But the whirlpool has no real existence. It's only water. It happens to be flowing in a certain way because that's the way the bottom of the river is shaped. There might be rocks there that are contributing to this this break in the flow that sets up the whirlpool. There has to be enough water. The speed of the water has to be right. If any of those things changes, the whirlpool won't be there the next day. The river will still be there, but the whirlpool will not be. And something could easily happen in the flow we call Robert that would change this whirlpool entirely. The brain can have a stroke, for example, and then you will see the same physical body, but the words coming out of the mouth won't be the same. They may not even be any coming out of the mouth. And this is our temporary existence. This is mortality. This is impermanence. And so the point of regarding myself as a flow is not to say that myself exists in no way at all, which is unfortunately a spiritual idea that's gained a lot of traction. There is no myself at all is the idea. I think that's a foolish idea. Of course there's a myself, and of course it's real. It's just no more real than anything else. No more real than thoughts, no more real than feelings, no more real than physical objects. And if we see it that way, there may be a sense of relaxation so that I have the freedom to speak and don't have to monitor my words, and I don't have to be careful, and I don't have to be afraid. I don't have to be afraid to be embarrassed. Maybe what I'm saying now is nonsense. Maybe someone out there will judge it. In fact, that does happen all the time on my Facebook page. All kinds of little nasty comments. I had one yesterday that said, for someone who says he doesn't know anything, you seem to know an awful lot. Yeah, that's right. So let me adjust my chair here while I'm on this rant. So you see, that's a misunderstanding of what I mean by not knowing anything. Of course I, Robert, know things. I know how to operate this computer, for example, but that's not the kind of not knowing that I'm talking about. The kind of not knowing that I'm advising and discussing is that we don't know how any of this got here, including myself, and we don't know what myself is. We don't know what will happen when this body dies. No idea. And so people who think they know, and this includes many spiritual teachers, are just making shit up. That's what I said in the intro.
Can the same thing be said for choice? Like choose, it seems like I've made choices throughout my life. You know, I can look at certain turning points and say, all right, I decided this, I decided that. I can see where other things just kind of happened. But I also see places where it seems like I made choices.
Well, let's look at what you mean by choice. Suppose I offer you your choice of two ice cream cones. One is vanilla and one is chocolate. And I say, take the one you like. And you decide, and maybe the decision takes place logically or open to your inspection and awareness, and you choose one. Let's say you choose chocolate. Well, why did you choose that? You chose it because you like it. Well, when did you decide or choose to like chocolate better than vanilla? When did that happen, David?
Yeah, very early.
When did you choose your likes and dislikes and your fears and aversions and your desires and your drives and your upbringing? All of this comes together, and then it may seem that one is choosing. But yes, okay, you got that. What's really happening is that you're becoming aware of what oneself really is, which is thoughts, feelings, and desires and fears and all of that. So our choices are really only like reading a book. It's really there, and now you read it. Yes? Did that clarify it?
Yes, and I'll certainly be listening to the recording again.
Okay. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, so what you were talking about, no one knows what happens after death. And of course, it's the primal fear. Because the biological prerogative is survival. So I'm just thinking with regard to, I mean, a lot of belief is based around sort of assuaging that fear. A lot of Christianity, you know, all the world religions deal with it. And I guess what happened was when I was waking up, well, I'm still am, but, you know, it's been a long process, but at some stage I went through a bereavement of my grandmother. I kind of followed her there. It felt like I went through the bardo. It was just a hellish, nightmarish period for about 6 months. And I met someone randomly who lived close by, and then became kind of, she was disabled and I was helping her. And then just one day, suddenly she began to channel my grandmother. And I just, you know, I hadn't asked for this. I wasn't looking for this, but it was quite bizarre that this was happening. I'm not holding out that there's life after death. I just don't know, and it's not really important to me. It's not an important question, but I think it refers to what you're saying about that. What you don't know, we don't know what there is beyond. Well, not even beyond death. It's also a lot of subtle stuff in life that seems to be part of what's going on, but is very subtle. But it's like a lot of the non-duality teachers are saying, oh, you know, this is not real, that's not real, whatever, you know, just dismissing it all. So I guess I'm asking for what your reflection on that is.
Okay. We don't know is the answer to all of those questions. I'm not sitting here and telling you that there's no Bardo or that your grandma wasn't residing in that Bardo temporarily and that you didn't have access to it. I don't know that. If I said either, yes, that proves that there's life after death, or if I said, that's just psychological wish fulfillment or whatever, those explanations would be lies. Either one or any explanation of that would be a lie, because the truth is we don't know. And a story about that is the emperor in the north heard that in his realm in the far south was an extremely wise Zen master who had all the answers. And this emperor had always lived with a tremendous anxiety about death. So he decided to have this great Zen master summoned so that he could interrogate him. And it was a long process. They had to send someone out, and that took months. And finally, they located this Zen master in the south of the country. And then they had to bring him back, which also took several months, during which time the Zen master refused to speak to anyone except to say thank you when he was offered tea. Well, he finally came before the emperor, and the emperor commanded him to reply to a question. He said, tell me, they say you're the wisest Zen master in my entire kingdom. So what happens when you die? And the Zen master remained silent, just as he had on the entire voyage. So the emperor asked him again, and he said, and this time you will reply or I'll have your head. And the Zen master said, sire, I cannot answer your question. The emperor became enraged, and he said, they say you're the greatest Zen master in the realm. Why can you not answer my question about what happens after death? And the Zen master looked him straight in the eye, and he said, sire, I may be a Zen master, but I'm not a dead Zen master. And I think that's the answer to all of these questions.
Yeah, I thought the same.
Yeah.
Dead yet.
And as far as the non-duality chit chat, I find non-duality to be really ironic, because the teachers discuss non-duality, meaning it's all one, but then they split it into the real and the not real. So as soon as the idea of non-duality is broached, there's a splitting right away.
Yeah, I see this.
And it's a lie, because when these people say, yes, I am Brahman, for example, which is one version, that's the Vedic version of non-duality. I am Brahman, and Brahman are one and the same. This separate jiva here, this personal self, is only a dream. It's only a kind of dream. They just pulled that out of their ass. I mean, I don't even know what it would mean, or how anyone could possibly know such a thing, how any living person could possibly know such a thing. It's just like the story about the Zen master. And frankly, I have no use for non-duality. Whenever I hear someone discussing it as a topic, I just lose interest entirely. What I'm interested in is what we are here and now, and what we can know here and now about our thoughts and our feelings, about our lives, about ways to get on in this world, and ways to understand our fears and our desires.
Yeah. So it is very much for me at the moment about integrating this self that appears here, and the with the realization of a lot of the stuff that we talk about here, and various groups as well that I belong to. And I don't know, I felt drawn to you because it felt very practical, what you were saying, and very down to earth. I found that the information on not the information, it was just the way that I was interacting, and everybody interacts on the non-duality groups. It was, it doesn't feel practical. It doesn't feel that I can, it's of no use to me. Like you're saying, I've got this insight, and it's of no use to me. And even it's put me out of action in a way, because I'm less able to negotiate and navigate this reality that I find myself in. And I don't even know what I'm trying to say. I'm sorry.
That's not a problem. Let me comment on what you have said.
Okay.
When you log on to one of the groups that you're in, and you start reading a thread, and someone makes an assertion, whatever it may be, I think the best thing to do is to say to yourself, oh, really? And how do you know that? And I think if you keep asking that question, 99% of what people are saying in these Facebook groups is just bullshit. It's horseshit. They have no way of knowing that. They are taking something that they want to believe, or that they do believe, or that they got from some dead supposed master like Ramana Maharshi or whomever, and just parroting it, just repeating it like a parrot. And then the question in my mind always is, yes, and how do you know that? Because when I look within myself, I don't really know much. There are things I can know, how to drive a car or whatever, but most of these esoteric questions, metaphysical questions.
I've been quite honest, and I haven't said, yes, I agree with something, or that it's my experience when it isn't. I think that most of the time I've been pretty good with that. Um, I'm trying to identify what it is that I'm
Well,
not
I'll
getting
tell
from
you
that.
what, Kamala, you can think it over
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you can come back later
Should,
because
yeah.
I see there's people waiting with raised
Yeah,
hands.
sure. Yeah, let them talk for sure.
Yeah, let me ask John Troy to speak. I see he's got his hand raised, and I just love having him here. He's a dear friend and a man of wisdom. So, John, you've got the floor.
Uh, I hear what you're saying. I'm a person, and I've had lots of incredible experiences in my life, no two alike, but the flower has bloomed in miraculous ways, and the brain is, and the universe is spectacular, to say the least. But I'd like to share something with you that has recently happened with me. I'm 78 years old, and I've had congestive heart failure. And a month ago, my heart rate started to slow down, and it stopped. And so they had to keep me alive by hitting with a defibrillator every 2 seconds in the ambulance. And then when I got to the emergency room, there was a scalpel ready to cut into my jugular vein to get an electrical wire down in there to get the heart to do something. And I found that I found the whole thing interesting. At no point did I seem to be really scared. It was just all very interesting. But yesterday I met with my heart doctor, and we were reviewing the thing, and I asked him, I said, was how close a call was that? And he laughed, and he said, it wasn't close. In intensive care, you had flatlined. That means naught. And as I shared right after that happened, it was like there was no tunnels of light or no Messiah waiting for me. I mean, it was an utter naught. Film out of a movie and splice the two ends together like there was no duration when I was flatlined.
Wow.
That's probably as close to non-duality as you can get, because it was just absolutely nothing, yet profoundly benign. So you don't get any closer than that. All the electrical signals had stopped. Now I'm run by artificial intelligence. It's not an assist. They got a pacemaker right in here, and it's what they call totally pacing. So I only have one heartbeat. If I get excited or something, or even extremely relaxed, my heart doesn't slow down or speed up or anything. It's like a metronome. And there's a box in my bedroom that connects with a data center at Duke, and it tweaks it every day. But the electrical signals are gone, just not there anymore. I feel good. I feel amazingly good. But that, what somebody might call a near-death experience or a death experience, wasn't an experience. It wasn't anything. It was just not. It was like forever before being born or something. And there's no knower or knowledge or anything about it. For me, I mean, that's just my own confession about it. And this is from one who has been in a lot of altered states of consciousness in my life, which I consider like flowers blooming, but flowers wither and fall off. So I would venture, based on my personal experience and non-experience, that all these afterlife scenarios, all of them, are false. That's would be my confession. And I think in accepting mortality rather than looking into that tunnel, into that bardo you speak of, when that's really closed, that's death and resurrection. Accepting death is resurrection as current reality, as now. And that's really beautiful, and with no escape hatches. I know Jesus supposedly said, while they were reasoning one time, oh, we need to go to a funeral. And he said, let the dead bury the dead. Because it's the idea of death, burying the idea of death and all these things about where it's going, and have a good journey. And there's a lot of this stuff going on these days in the New Age spiritual crowd about reincarnation and karma. Well, karma assumes there's that the narrator is for real, and there's a judge on it, and if you do something bad, you're gonna have to pay for it. And it's another doctrine of sin to be discarded along with the Christian doctrines of sin or any other doctrines of sin. All this, that stuff came out of a lot of that mythology came out of a caste system in India. They put the Brahmins on the top, and then the warrior class, and then you got the merchant class, and then you got the lower caste, and then you got people who can't even make it into a caste called the outcasts. And the Brahmins, the guru class over there, keeps all this in line so they can stay on top. And it's bullshit. And a lot of these afterlife scenarios are embedded in those mythologies. And it's another doctrine of sin that I would say you're better off without. And so trying to know about death based upon experiences when you're living, those are living experiences, and they're really far out, and they're beautiful and everything, and no one's denying that. But the conjecture of taking that and forcing it into something when you're dead and gone only prevents you from closing the escape hatches, which will bring you the maximum amount of beauty into your life, and that impermanency that truly is beauty. So
Thank you, John. It's a great statement. The explanation of how all this judgmental religion and such has always been in the service of the top dogs. You said that in the last Zoom. I heard it then, and you've repeated it again. I guess that's really the core of the objection to all of this chit chat, because it's always designed to keep the pot boiling for somebody. Whereas a moment of understanding has a price beyond rubies. It's what everybody really wants. A moment of contact with this world. For real, not through filters. Is what I think many of us are seeking in spirituality. And what I'm trying to say is it's not there, it's here. So thank you for that, John. Comments, please. Let's have somebody jump in here. You want to give it a shot again, Martina? See if your mic works.
Yeah, I'm going to try and see. I've got a old laptop. Yeah, this is beautiful. Comes along with this message from a friend of mine. I'm going to need to read, and I don't know what that's going to look like on your screen, but it's a short one. It's right in here with how we have lived our lives by it with complete authenticity, thinking that it's going to give us the escape hatch, like John was saying. And from my friend in Malahay really touched me deeply and brought up so much compassion. Us flailing around trying to understand living this life. She says, I awakened to the reality of fears this morning, fears of finally succumbing to the fight and facing years of being. It's not just the knees, it's the back, is Janet, I think, too, and I'm not as tall as I was. Difficulty standing upright, human style, this body. No matter how I cared for it, not abused it, I feel betrayed and robbed of life. More to the point, I cannot care for others adequately. What is my life without service? My friend Donna understands these too. She's guiding me and helping me from the physical plane, but with awareness of my spirit place too. She will take me to the water today. I expect help I can get in, for it is only in water's supportive substance that feels free. I just find that all of from the heart, so deep and potent, so true when facing. I was deeply touched by it and I wanted to share it. I felt it had a good place here.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, Martina. Thank you for that comment. You broke up in a couple of places, but I got the gist.
Okay. I wonder what's wrong with the mic. I will back out.
It could be my pinchy internet connection.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. Hearing from John is really great, because this idea of sin and redemption is, in a way, the whip that is used upon us culturally. Every culture has its holy people who get to make these decrees as if they had some special authority that John Troy doesn't have. You see, it's really absurd. They just sectioned off and they said, all of this belongs to us. This is reality. And all of your bullshit is just your idiotic dreams, doubts, and fears. Yes. Okay, so what I say is, when we really look deeply into ourselves and understand our animal nature, there's something in us that's just batshit terrified. It can't be denied. It's part of what you call a survival instinct. You just run if you can, and you fight if you can't escape, That's what it is. it's deeply ingrained into us because what we are psychologically, it developed over countless eons of evolution to the point where we embody all of those selves. All of the ancestors are in us, including jungle animals and all the rest of it. And those are our drives, unconscious drives, is what I'm saying. And a lot of what spirituality is selling is, if you believe this, the anxiety will go away. And that is true if you want to be hypnotized. Hypnosis is a good treatment for anxiety. I don't think it's ethical to use it myself, but I think anxiety is really an important stepping stone. I mean, seeing the anxiety. So that when I was doing psychotherapy, for example, and someone came in with an anxiety disorder or whatever, the work would be to try to get them to see the anxiety, not the fear that comes out of being anxious in the first place, but the actual anxiety, see. And that's just self-knowledge. Has nothing to do with spirituality or any of those frameworks. The frameworks are the, you know, that's the bling. Frameworks are the bling. The actual being takes place only here and now. And all of these thoughts and fears and drives that we all have, they're undeniable. What I'm saying is, if they arise, they do. No one put them there. No one's responsible for those feelings at all. We all have big problems in certain ways. And when you find someone like John, who I know him, apparently he accepts mortality and impermanence and has a good time with it, because the only really good time is having good time with reality. Anyone can have a good time at the amusement park, but it gets tiring and also stops working at a certain point. So after that bizarre rant, who wants to, thanks again, John. You want to say anything more? John Troy? I don't know if John is there. Okay, who else would like to speak at this point? Rasim.
Hello. Hi, Robert.
Hello,
Hear me?
Rasim. I hear you just loud and clear, Rasim.
Okay, very nice. Thank you. Robert, I just wanted to jump in and thank you really for this book that you wrote, for 10,000 Things. I don't know, I mean, I have so much to say about this book. I mean, I have read it once and then now I'm reading it twice, but very slowly. I'm reading chapter 1 again and again, because it's so nice, really. It opens each time more and more. You know, it's I've also been more of us here, on a spiritual journey, and this book somehow, you know, just washed away all the beliefs, all this, I don't know, this authority things and so on, and it somehow left me alone with myself. I mean, there was kind of no way out, you know. I was alone with myself, and this is it. I mean, I had to face myself, basically. I had to face my anxiety, my fears, my personality, everything that I wanted somehow to avoid. Of course, it was difficult, and it's still, from time to time, it's difficult, but it gave me such a freedom, you know, to be myself. I feel more myself than ever I have felt, you know, this freedom to be myself. And I just really want to thank you for this book. And yeah. Yes, I really do not have questions. I just wanted to say these things. You know, sometimes there are some questions, but somehow, I don't know, I cannot take any questions really seriously that much. It's when I think about the question, I see that somehow I can find the answer. Like, I remember what you said at some point, and I think about it, and I analyze it somehow myself and see that, I mean, the question somehow disappears. Yeah. And I say, yeah, this is it. This is basically it. Sometimes it's, of course, difficult to get over this, you know, projected myself that the way I want to be, that I always tried to be. Sometimes I see that, no, life is not like that. Maybe I can never be like that I imagined, or I don't know. And it's somehow sometimes difficult to accept that this is only what we have. But at the same time, it gives me such a big freedom and joy, you know, to accept this, that's it. This is it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and I'm still reading your book, and it opens more and more. And as you say, I mean, it's just an understanding. It happens when it happens. I mean, I don't know where am I, what am I, what have. I mean, I also don't care really what I have understood. I just say, I mean, this is it, and I accept the life as it is, as it comes. Yeah.
Yes. Well, if we ever get a glimpse of things as they really are, there isn't really any option. I mean, what choice do you have?
I know there is no other choice. This is the way it is. I mean, as you say, this is the way cookie crumbles.
Yes, let me stop you right there. That's it. And so if we see that as it really is on a factual level, this is not woo-woo here, I'm speaking factually. We have no idea what the next moment holds. We only want to believe we do because there's an anxiety to just falling forever, but that's what really is happening. Except as Trungpa said, yes, you're falling forever and you have no parachute. That's what John Try calls the escape hatch. Trungpa called that the parachute. Same thing, same thing. So he says, yes, you're falling forever and no parachute. And that's the bad news. Well, the good news is there's no ground. It just is what it is. Of course, we're just falling through space. You're not the doer. You see it. You're conscious of it, but you're not producing this. You couldn't. It's impossible. It's arising beyond our ken, beyond our ability to mess with it in any way. One is just part of it. And it gets more complex. The deeper you go into it, there's no figuring this out. And that's the point. All we have is now. And we hear that, and we hear that. Spirituality has that all we are is now stuff up the kazoo. That's not my critique of it. That part is okay. It's just when they tell you what to fill it with, that's when the bullshit starts. And that's what 99% of that spirituality jazz is. Somebody trying to fill in this emptiness for you with their ideas. And I say it's best to just be the emptiness for as long as possible and see what that is, because that's what we really are in a way. The rest is mostly programming. But there's a self that's not just programmed. I say, that's my, but don't take my word for it. I mean, just, so what you were talking about here is this sense where you begin to understand that you have no option. This is the way things are, and you've gotten you're in the embrace of that idea now of understanding, yes, this shit's really happening, and it's the way it is. not some idealized state in which there's no anxiety or whatever. Of course you feel anxiety. We all do. A lot of chewing gum being sold in this world, and Xanax and everything in between. See, that John knows all about this. I mean, that statement's amazing. Thank you again, John. It's profound.
Yeah, I also want to thank John because, you know, I appreciate and enjoy his talks more as I read your book. I mean, I can understand him much better, and it's really valuable what he says. Thank you, Robert. Thank you.
Rasim, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for the testimonial about the book. That'd be a good little YouTube video book review. I really want people to read this book. It's having a really good effect on the readers. And it's got no big time publisher doing anything with it. So this is the way to get it out there, word of mouth to others, and doing these meetings and such, discussing the book. Because that's the experience that people are reporting to me, readers. I get a lot of messages nowadays. And people are saying, this changed my point of view, this wiped the slate clean, this capsized my boat. This is the last spiritual book I will need to read, or whatever. It's the same understanding that this is your life, yours. This is your time to be this aliveness. It's hard to manage at times, I know that. I'm human too. However, what option do we really have? See, and then, of course, these are terrifying ideas, some of them, because they come from our animal depths. They're not controllable. You can't get a handle on terror. It just is what it is. It's stronger than you are, believe me. No, see, and then people will offer to fill those spaces with their understanding of reality. And most people, I don't know if it's most, that's too pessimistic. Many people will just buy into it right away without any deep self-questioning. What's the meaning of all this? How did all of this get here? What the fuck is this? See, it's a real question. And what I'm saying is you should not let anyone else fill that space. That space is your aliveness. Don't let someone steal it and inhabit it with their memes. Fill the space in with all these slogans and promises and everything. It's not that way. True psychological understanding is way beyond spirituality. It's in another league. Spirituality is about belief. True psychological understanding is about forgiving yourself in this moment, radical self-acceptance, and then look at what you have. First, prepare yourself and just say, it's radical self-acceptance. Whatever comes up next, I own it. And just be that way for as long as you can, non-judgmentally, viewing your experience and what you know of it and what you really don't know of it. Not what you read somewhere or what someone told you, not that. So the 10,000 Things book ends with a whimper, not a bang, right? Nothing is offered. And the one publisher kept it for a long time, and one of their readers, and they liked it, but eventually turned it down. One of their readers said, I love the book, I really love it, but when you get to the end, then what do you do? That was but you see, that's the point. There isn't really a you to do. You understand that what you call myself is unknowable. If there's a God, that's it. You know, all these powers that you're attributing elsewhere. So I thank you again, John. You always manage to bring this kind of discussion to the one and only axiom in the entire system, and that is mortality, impermanence and mortality. That's what we really know. And all the stories about that are what we don't know. And what we probably will never know, can't know. We're only animals with highly developed brains. This isn't just because religion tells you you're made in God's image. Forget that bullshit. We're just animals, man, in highly developed condition mentally. It could go beyond this. There could evolve a smarter human than any of us are now. Possible. We don't know that. But what we have right now is this level of intelligence that allows us to talk this way. And I'm into making use of it, not filling that space up with the theories secondhand and escape hatches, as John called it, or parachutes, or whatever. It's about mortality. And if you can't face it all at once, the way that John can, at least face some of it. Start out with as much as you can chew up, because eventually that's what it comes down to. Everything you call myself is most likely entirely impermanent. Entirely. Just comes apart. The molecules may be reused in other life forms or in stalagmites in some cave. We don't know anything about that. We know that we're here now, and that if we deny our animal nature, no matter how spiritual we imagine we are, we will never understand jack shit. That's what I'm saying. And so that involves all of these psychological feelings that we try to deny in ourselves. But that is our animal nature. When you have a strong sexual yin, that's real. It's not some bad thing. You have to put your foot on the neck of that and crush it or whatever. It's not like that. It's real. It's your animal nature. It doesn't mean you have to act on every impulse. We don't. We're all under some control. Otherwise, we couldn't survive in this one of the greats said, yes, it's hell, but it's not the worst one. I like that. That pretty much says it. Okay, I want to pass the baton here on one of my rants again. So who was another hand up? Was there? Yes, Manny. I think Randy, you're next. You there, Randy?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just trying to mute something that's on here. Okay, there you go. Hey, Robert. Is this working? Hey, so earlier in the meeting, you mentioned how there's no real controlling entity inside, how there's, as you speak, the words are basically just coming out, and there's no like moderating entity, or there's no script writer. And I can relate to that. I mean, on a certain level, I mean, that's how I feel now. I had a vague sense of what I want to share, or at least point at here, but I don't have a pre-written question or anything. So I guess what I'd like to ask about or point towards is the distinction between the absence of a moderating script writing entity, and what I think is it seems like there is something here in everybody, in this room or elsewhere, that it may not be a moderating entity, but it is a moderating process, in the sense of there's something that keeps what comes out of the mouth. It knows how to keep it relevant. It knows how to keep it relatively cordial. It knows how to keep it understood. It shies away from being overly offensive, or might shy away from being disapproved of, although there's maybe a spectrum of that. And as far as spiritual experiences go, I know it's possible to have maybe one of the more terrifying varieties of such an experience, where you see that there's it's like chaos, but there is something there's at least a process that is moderating the chaos. Some things you said a bit ago is like, you can't get a handle on terror, and you say, like, we're all just basically animals here living in a civilized manner, and it's like that. There's a while back I spoke with you about an individual who I was living with at the time, who was consuming large quantities of psychedelics, and from his way of explaining things, there was some kind of, again, his words, a glimpse of what is, a glimpse of reality. He claimed that his self disappeared or was eradicated or whatever, and the result was just a torrent of very uncontrolled, unmoderated, just what would normally be construed as negativity, what would be normally construed as total, like, toxic, offensive, all of these things that are just, that you from a conventional viewpoint, you would not necessarily want to associate with, or something that would not be seen as polite, but kind of to the extreme. While there was a legitimate sense of an abiding nature to it, in the sense of he could talk or write for hours on end for, it's been years at this point, following this guy, at least his online presence. You'd expect something like that to burn out, or to be institutionalized, or whatever you'd expect happens. But this guy goes on and on for a long time. And there is something that I feel maybe legitimate about that, in the sense of some kind of a primal or unmoderated, unfiltered expression going on. And it just, I guess, again, I don't really have a specific question here, except it seems like a relevant area of exploration, or at least something that's unclear, where it's like, yes, there might be a dissolution of the moderating entity. You might suddenly find words arising out of you. You might feel a liberation or a freedom, but in the vast majority of cases, you remain a relatively functional human being. You don't necessarily offend people too much. You stay understandable. You stay relevant. There's a sense of, I don't even know, but it's just strange that this can happen, where it's almost, I guess it's like the possibility is that there's deeper levels of the dissolution of filters, where you might call it like a Jungian shadow roof is blown off, or I don't even know, but it's like certain unconscious toxic or negative forces are in there. And it's just strange that it's possible for the the moderating or script writing entity to dissolve, while what might be these more powerful negative forces, who knows, I don't even know what I'm talking about necessarily, but it seems like those forces are not usually expressed. And I'm wondering if that's because there's some kind of intelligence at play that knows what is appropriate or not in some universal sense, or it's just an area that it seems very unexplored or rarely talked about. Yeah, I think that's about it as far as what I wanted to share. And again, it's not really a specific question, but I'll leave it to you from here.
Yeah, it's kind of a specific question, I think, when you boil it down. What I get out of it is the question is kind of about if there's a benign presence of some kind or not. That's how I took it. What do you make of that, Randy?
It's not necessarily asking about the benign presence, but there is, I can't help but notice that in the vast majority of cases of, I mean, to use the word awakening, it seems like in the vast majority of cases, there is, people stay relatively, you might get a little bit more free, and you might, lose friends and family because maybe you will be construed as more offensive, or your behavior might come off the rails a little bit, which I think everybody kind of wants, because everybody is used to a straitjacket of language itself, if not spirituality. And spirituality is probably the worst of the straitjacket. But even if there's one case possible that I've been exposed to, but I'm sure it's not the only case. But even if there's one case where somebody claims that controlling entity is disappeared, which then results in all of these basically a total disregard for politeness, and basically just being, I don't even know how to describe it, but you know what I'm getting at, just total distastefulness in a conventional sense. If that can happen in even one case, there has to be some kind of distinction there, where it's like, is it that most people who go through awakening are still holding on to control, or is it that maybe this individual has some crazy rebound effect where maybe he's controlling things more in some strange sense? Or does he potentially have psychological underlying issues that most people don't have? Or
yeah, I think I get the point. That's just on a fault line there, and there's really no firm ground upon which anyone can stand, I would say, because we don't know the answers on that level. We know plenty of answers. There's libraries filled with philosophy books or books of religion or whatever. But on the level that you're discussing, that's the most dangerous ground in the world, because someone could speak exactly as I'm speaking now and be a total psychopath. You have no way of really distinguishing that, not at this point, unless you have some kind of second sight and can look right into my heart. Because people play roles, and some people are really good at playing roles. And so to be real in this world is very difficult. And what you're calling this kind of adjustment, and who's doing that, all of these questions, is there any there when these thoughts of not wanting to offend, and well, I'm jumping ahead. When you originally spoke, you were talking about the sense of myself at all, a myself who knows the rules and doesn't want to break the rules because there has to be some social acceptance. And yet, on the other hand, you're aware that these rules are what's possibly keeping you from freer self-expression, I would say. Let's put it that way. That's kind of what I got from it.
Yeah, that's definitely closer to the heart of it, sure.
Okay, so this is why all this talk about kill the ego, to me, is very crazy. We need the ego. It's part of the psychic economy of human beings. It's not something that you just decree out of existence. That's not the way to do it, in my opinion, in my view. I'm only speaking about myself, my personal experience. I'm not writing a prescription here. I have to keep saying that because some people who talk this way might also give you the impression that they have this great understanding. If you could only understand it the way Robert understands it, then you'd really get it. What you would understand is that there's nothing to get and no one to get it. And then you really would be out of existence in that controlling sense. But I don't think that happens to just anyone. It's an experience. And when it happens, some people can go off the rails, as you say. Someone could be mentally ill and be solipsistic in that way and become very confused socially. So I think that's not where we want to go. But the closer you walk to these fault lines where the thing can just crumble to gravel right beneath your feet, or quicksand, if you like that, if you live in Martina's old stomping grounds down in the jungle. Wow, when those rivers run, man, you can't walk in that shit. It's impossible. So that's where we are if we want to be. And I don't want to banish Robert Saltzman's ego. I need his ego, his ego is needed while alive in this human form. Of course, it's part of it. You need that. You have to be social and be decent to other people and really eventually learn what compassion really means. And service, as Martina alluded to earlier. It was a good comment. I heard that part of it, Martina. Yeah, there comes a point where compassion really arises, I say. But not everyone gets there. Someone can go off the rails in another direction when they get in this same basic frame of mind. And there's no one controlling it. I think the world will always be filled with mentally ill people the way it is now, just as it is now. There's no reason to think it will become less prevalent. And there'll also be awakened people. And I am saying that the feeling is, I'm not the doer. I think I'm going to ask John Troy to comment on this as soon as I wrap it up. I've gone on too long as is. The feeling I am not the doer is a very dangerous feeling. You're taking out some social supports that have been there for a long time. And you have to do that with caution, not just kick out the entire log jam and run around like a maniac. That's not Zen. Running around like a maniac is not Zen. It isn't. There's a lot of people think to be free, you have to be wild. That is not the idea. You may be wild if that's what comes up, but it's not required.
Well, that kind of running around seems to have a lot of circles in it.
It's impossible to put a peg in this, man. That's my basic message. You're not going to pin this down. I'm not going to pin it down. John Troy's not going to pin it down. I think the experience that I see in John and that he sees in me, it's a kind of flowering. It's not that anyone is in control, more control than, I'm not in more control than I ever was, Randy. I've always been a little loose, and I still am.
It sounds like it's more of a flowering and less of a volcano.
Well, you know, you're only young once. I was a bass player in a rock band, and a songwriter and bass player in a rock band, and it was a good band. Yeah, we did some great gigs. So that, you know, that's one kind of show, and then sitting here like stripping myself naked is another kind of show. Or hearing John Troy, you know, tell you his intimate experiences of his NDE. John Troy's NDE is a beautiful starting point, because I've not had my heart stop or any of that, but I have had total anesthesia, and it sounds just like the same thing. Total anesthesia, where there was no time, and you woke up again in your hospital bed, and the intervening hours, it's not that they went missing. There isn't anything there. There's no there. But as John says, no one's getting hurt there either, so it's kind of cool. That's how I feel about it, about not being at all. I mean, it's okay. It's inevitable. And so if we can see that it's really okay, we can relax quite a bit. That's what I have on that. So I'm going to turn this over to John at this point. Thank you so much for your words, John, and continue to be inspired by them.
You were mentioning earlier about presence and trying to reconnect with the presence, if I was hearing you correctly. And I'm not so sure for myself that presence has duration, as Robert in his anesthesia or in dreamless sleep or whatever, there doesn't seem to be any presence. So that this duration of presence that one might seek is, in my opinion, futile, that these experiences, these things arise and they're magnificent, but there's no two alike. They're all different flowers and they're blooming, and it's not to put those down, but to say they're all transient. There's no permanency of any so-called spiritual experience, and I would question calling anything spiritual, because it's all seamless. It's all a seamless energy in a play with itself. You mentioned a higher power, or the higher power I see is the power of everything, and that systemic universe is a higher power than the imagined power that you could do anything about it. So the acceptance of where you are right now is good enough as being aligned with what wants to happen. And spiritual people might call that grace, or the sports people might call it the zone, or they got all kinds of names for it in India and everything, but it's all the same. That the spontaneity of things happening of their own accord, and the perfection of that is really a beautiful revelation. And but there's nobody B-O-D-Y at the helm doing anything. It's for that babble in the brook to happen, it takes the galaxy and then the solar system and the sun, and then the way the planets form around the sun, where they turn in the distance from the sun, and then it's the moon and the tides and the weather, and all of that is creating that little babble in the brook. And when we babble here, I see it not much different than the babble in the brook. That it's systemic in a way. It's that in choosing your flavor of ice cream, if it's chocolate, that decision wasn't made. That was a choiceless event, and that trying to seek that there's just no two of these so-called experiences that are the same. Everything is different. The impermanence is the beauty of it. And to try to find that permanent vision or the light, or I've even noticed that there's no space or duration when the lights are really out, and even all of that is imagination, and clinging to it. Searching for it is the best way to miss it. And all of these little grassroots terms and things out there, there's a lot of fake news is a term that's overused now, but boy, there's a lot of fake news in that. And what Robert and his work in the 10,000 Things is that there's a lot of complicity. There's just as much complicity that's in the evangelical movement back at Trump and that whole mindset. There's an equal amount over here in this New Age spirituality thing, and all these people spouting all this bullshit, and there are times that people speak up about the bullshit and bring some common sense into it, and are not complicit, and they call it for what it is. And people like Jesus or Ramana Maharshi or UG or Alan Watts, these are the more famous ones, they've called out the bullshit and afterwards been idolized with the same bullshit that they call out. And but these mountains of common sense are a great relief for us to say the emperor's got no clothes. And people do feel offended by it because their beliefs are so deep, and that's to be expected. But I think there's a time for the complicity to end, and to see that truth is not a thought or an idea or a doctrine or any of that. It certainly isn't owned by a religion, ideology. And as Robert was saying, that at the end, in the what do you do, he doesn't offer you anything. He doesn't offer you another remedy of something you can do, other than removing the spiritual pacifiers that we cling to so dearly. But in those pacifiers being let go, we find a relief and a freedom that's unimaginable in a mind that's seeking for a truth. So that's my say-so. Whatever.
Well, who would like to jump in here and converse with John a bit on this subject?
Yeah, I will, Robert. It's Paul here.
You've got the floor, Paul.
Thanks, Robert. I just wanted to...
Hi, Paul.
Hi, John. How you going? Good to see you. I just wanted to mention that something I've noticed when the spiritual pacifiers are taken off is that there's the energy that was put into all that searching for years for me is released unto itself, not in a woo-woo way, but one of the benefits of reading the 10,000 Things for me that I've noticed, and I just wanted to share my experience, was that it brings a sort of sense of peace, even if I have been experiencing anxiety, and that's my natural disposition. Was born not tabula rasa, so I was born with a certain anxious disposition. But one of the benefits of the 10,000 Things has been just a release of the energy from that search, and it's I've had a few terrifying months where a couple of months ago I went through sort of a collapse of my world in a small, in a way, and I just sat for a week in the morning when I woke up and allowed the terror and the terror to move across me like waves, and I just sat with it, and it's almost like I just let it just so happen that I sort of just dropped and let things be, but it happened in its own way. I think one of the other benefits of reading the 10,000 Things, it's enabled me to just be not Zen-like, but just quieter, more simple, enabled me to not to just see, definitely see things as they are. My dad at the moment has had some, very tough illnesses. He has Parkinson's, and then he's had some, other news with a tumor and that sort of thing on his intestines. But I've felt through it all a real sense of I don't know, calm. And I think, Robert, you mentioned earlier that there's an emptiness that you can sit in, and I don't see that emptiness as a nihilism or fatalism. It's just I feel like I'm just things are being accepted as they happen. The terror, definitely Rilke, when he says that poem by Rilke, which you had in your book, where it says, let it happen to you, the terror and the pain, so the terror and the beauty, just keep going, no feeling is final. And I just found that that is my experience. And I think about a couple of weeks ago, I encountered a couple of times in your post, Robert, where you talked about walking the razor's edge, nihilism on one side, idealism and eternalism on the other side. And I remember John talking about there sometimes a repose happens. So I've found that I've walked that razor's edge for quite a long time, but also there's times of repose and a sort of a kind of an emptiness, an open space. But yeah, I'm taking my licks, but I'm letting it happen. But it's not like I'm letting it happen, and I can, it doesn't feel like there really is a doer. It's not like I'm opposing society. I'm just letting things happen as they happen, and I can really see that I really don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 minutes. But I don't feel as fearful, and I think the benefit of the 10,000 things is it wipes the slate really clean. And I'm one to walk cautiously and carefully with reading the book. I did that when I was listening to Jiddu Krishnamurti for a couple of years. I saturated myself in his teachings, and I really wanted to understand and experientially experience what he was saying in my life. And I think that's even listening to Jiddu Krishnamurti, Chogyam Trungpa's, I read his book, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, all those years ago. I think it doesn't plant a seed, but years later, when I came across the 10,000 things, it really has given, reading J.K. and even U.G. Krishnamurti, a lot of that stuff, which I'd never took lightly. I'm a curious fellow. I like to explore and really understand and experience it for myself in my life. I've found that the 10,000 things is kind of really clarified a lot of that stuff, but it's also it takes out self-pity, cleans the slate. It's almost like, it's almost like you definitely don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 minutes, but where I'm at right now would appear to society as not successful but I've lost my ambition. I don't care for being seen to be a particular way, but I'm in the place, it seems to have worked out. Systemic causation is a remarkable thing, and it seems to have brought me to a place where, okay, I'm living at the back of my parents' house. I'm 47 years old, but my parents aren't young anymore, and it just so happens that it's worked out that I get to drive my dad around to the hospital, just be quiet around him. And I actually feel like the book itself has benefited my family, and they probably don't even know it, but it's benefited them because it's sort of brought about a calmer space within myself. So I don't know what other benefits your book has for people, Robert, but and I think I wouldn't know whether it rewires you or whatever it does, but it promises nothing, and I kind of like that anyway. But it's look, I just wanted to. I'm reading it a third time, and it does wipe the slate clean, and so just wanted to say thanks very much for your book, Robert.
Wow, wow! What a great testimonial. I'll have to make a video review for Forte with that one. I'm so glad to hear you say that. That's great. That's really great. I think the space I call myself belongs to me. That's how I see it. And that's the play space. And there's not much knowing in it, but there's plenty of playing around. At least you can do that. So that's my way of kind of dealing with the despair or the terror of the situation, or whatever you want to call it. And that's a psychological necessity to have something. I mean, when John says we're babbling here, he's quite right. And it's good that we can babble in this way. It takes a lot of pressure off. To be able to discuss these matters at all is helpful, but it can't fix anything. What is. And there's no denying that except as some kind of delusion. See, people can get into delusive states. John was pointing out that reincarnation and all this is kind of a delusive state that was whipped up as a belief, as a hypnotic belief, so that the rulers of the realm could enforce their edicts with the force of damnation behind it, sin and all this. That's so clear to me. That is such a basic political understanding. Nothing to do with spirituality at all. They just claim that ground and say we're the ones who make the rules. It's our playground. It's our ball. So you can't. And then we're indoctrinated with that from the outside. So that's part of it. As far as your family, I've known that your dad was ill. You've said that to me. I'm really sorry. I know that's hard. But I like what you said about that reading the 10,000 Things has shown some light on that, let's say, call it that. I mean, our lives belong to us. There's not some theoretical model that we're trying to live up to. We need to enjoy this moment, because in the next moment, anything that we could have enjoyed is gone and can never come back again. So if we're always behind, we're always missing out, and then there's this need to fill that space with something because you feel so empty. Whereas when you're in the present, you're not empty or full. It kind of fades out into a flow. Now, the thing is, Paul, when I speak that way, I'm not talking about ordinary physical, financial necessities and all of that. These don't really fit in the same realm exactly. Someone might have to work 3 jobs and drive a taxi in the off hours to make ends meet, but that person could still be free in the sense that I'm talking about. Because free doesn't mean free of all physical and emotional restraints. It means living out those restraints, but with freedom. Because we can't really avoid our circumstances. Events just arise. It's not that we're inventing what we want to happen next or something. It doesn't work that way. Each moment you got dealt a hand. You look at it, and before you really can read that hand, you're on to the next hand. And then you're like me, you're old and ill, and your life is drawing to a close, and you feel this flowering. That's completely beyond your will. See, and I know it's the same for John. I'm not doing anything. This flower is flowering, and then it will fall off the stalk, it will be dead. And in this flowering, this is the aroma. And I'm not doing that for your benefit. Nobody's doing it. I'm enjoying it in the same way that you're enjoying it, frankly. The 10,000 Things book blows my mind every time I read it. And I wrote it, and I read it at least 100 times, all the proofreading and all that. It still has power because it's honest. It's an honest report. It's like U.G. Krishnamurti. John mentioned him. I really like U.G. Krishnamurti on this also. He is not denying that there's spirituality. He never really denies that. If you follow what he's saying this world is reality, because if you don't learn to play by those rules, you'll be singing Looney Tunes and merry melodies or whatever, right? would be in the booby hatch. So of course we have to conform, but we don't have to conform on the energy level. Hardly, not at all. We just have to be willing to let the cookie crumble. As Martina, that was my words that captured her imagination as to what I'm saying. It's a very good image. The cookie crumbles. It's not like you're crumbling it and saying, no, I'll take a little more off here. The thing's just coming apart. And what an old guy like me or like John Troy will tell you, I'm not going to speak for John, but he's my brother, I know. It comes upon you quicker than you would imagine. Old age, debility, and death, I mean. It's a quickie. It may not seem that way when you're a little younger, but man, it comes quick. And so I'm saying to everyone, myself included, giving myself encouragement, get it while it's hot, baby. So, any hands up here or, yeah, I know, John. Amazing manifestation. Who else wants to speak here? Karen, are you here?
Can you hear me?
Hello, Karen.
Hi. Hi. Yeah, I wanted to share something. So 10 years ago, I had my first encounter with nothing in the Amazon jungle with Shipibo people and ayahuasca. And it was very profound. I was just there trying to not kill myself. I was not prepared to bump into I don't even really know how to talk about it 10 years later. And I was surrounded by a bunch of people trying to tell me, they didn't speak English. They were just like, it's cool, and everybody else tried to tell me what it was. And I felt totally alone. I felt so much pain coming back into all of the separate beliefs and constructs I had inside. And I spent 10 years searching, being in an ashram, doing vipassanas, doing a lot more psychedelics, paying a lot of money for healers, reading a lot of books, following a lot of teachers, a lot, and not trusting myself because everybody else was trying to tell me. And I found you through Liberation Unleashed. I got on the forums in November and I saw an article you wrote on there. And I started seeing more of you and listening to your interviews that are available, and then watching the Zoom. And then I ordered your book. And I just really want to say thank you, because it's been very painful. It's a lot of straight talk and it feels really good. And I'm learning to trust my experience. And I just really want to say thank you to John too. I really appreciate the way you guys are talking so much. It's hard to even talk about it, but thank you so much.
Ball's in your court, John Troy. Take it, take it.
I haven't done ayahuasca. I've done a few other things, but I haven't done that. But I've heard many tales about ayahuasca. I understand it's got I forget the term, DMT in it. Those kind of experiences in my own experience, are so extraordinary, they rob the attention, and we find ourselves seeking a repeat. And we got a wannabe for a repeat of something that happened in the past, and that becomes a vicious cycle. And at my age, I just see it as entertainment. It's, Robert was saying you get tired of the amusement park. So it's like going to the amusement park, this incredible entertainment. And the dissolutions and the insights can be profound and beautiful, but they're transient. They're impermanent. And every trip is different. Something new, something a little more alluring, but it winds up sitting on the horizon and beckoning like a mirage. And to understand the mirage, then it ceases to command your attention. It doesn't mean the mirage goes away, but it no longer beckons. And so from listening to you and then taking a spin with in an ashram, but in the process that exhausts the remedies, it exhausts the desire, and the seeking for the repeat robs all the attention in the here, the DMT or the LSD or whatever, in a moment can disrupt your habit of cognition of seeing the way things are, and it falls apart, but then it comes back together. But as it falls apart, there may be a sense of peace, because the knower is undone in the process, but then the knower appears again, and the extraordinary experience commands so much attention that it robs attention in the here and now, where it's really at, and the good side is maybe it's really great entertainment, and the downside is then you get addicted to the entertainment and miss the true beauty. It's like Dorothy on the yellow brick road, and at some point Toto pulls back and reveals all the stagecraft around all that stuff, because it is all stage. She just wants to go home. And she had it all along. Frank Baum wrote that story about the time Ramana Maharshi went to Tiruvannamalai and started and became known as Ramana Maharshi. But in The Wizard of Oz, nobody made a messiah out of it or made a religion or a doctrine out of it. But the message is exactly the same. You had it all along. Frank Baum was a member of the Theosophical Society. Not many people know that. His wife was a member, and his mother-in-law was a member. this was a spot. That story has truly reached the multitudes, far more than Ramana Maharshi's story has touched people, and on so many different levels. And today it's still a fable. It's a very cherished fable. At the same time, you look at Ramana Maharshi and they're making him into a messiah and creating religion around him. So these ashrams and all this stuff, when you understand the politics of it, and I've been backstage at Ramana Maharshi scene, and I know the so-called heirs there. And it's a museum, and it's stagecraft. And boy, that technique. And but the Wizard of Oz, Toto disrupts the stagecraft to reveal the ordinary backstage, and that there's really no place like home, and the ordinary is really pretty far out if your attention is not being robbed by wanting things to be other than the way they are. So it looks to me like your remedies have been exhausted. That's more attention for the here and now and more peace of mind. When your attention is not seeking all the time, it starts to notice things. In the here and now. And that's, Robert was mentioning about creativity, I think on the last thing. It's about noticing things, threads in what's happening that weave together into a tapestry that becomes true creativity that we notice. It's not a contrivance, but that happens when the attention is free from wanting to be something other than the way it is.
Thank you for that, Karen. I think that what I'm saying is simply that whatever is arising in this moment is you. There's not some other you watching what's arising in this moment. You're implicit in it. You're implicated in it. You're every thread of this tapestry called now has some of you in it. It's not that you kill your ego like all these so-called holy men are advising, or get your neck on the, your boot on the neck of the devil or whatever. It's not like that. That's not it. That's a false judgment. That's what John was discussing earlier so eloquently about sin and guilt and all this. It's not, and then the question arose a bit later about, well, but isn't there some kind of moral authority here, or we have to get along with our in-laws? What if we fuck up too bad because we're being free? Then what? That question arose also. And see, it's not really like that. That's the fear, and I understand that the fear is real. It's a real fear. If you feel it, it's real. Oh, there's my wife, Katanya. Hello, Katanya. Huh. How's it going?
Good. Just
brought me a tea.
Yeah.
Here, come in here for a minute.
Tea.
Say hi. Say hi. Say hi to the folks, Katanya.
Wait a minute.
Hi, Katanya.
This one.
You could sit on my lap.
Hi, Katanya.
Hi,
There you go. There you go.
Hello.
Hello there.
Hi.
How are you? Good to see you.
Well, enough of words. It's good to see your faces. It really is.
So, to imagine what the
Words
two
on
of us were
paper.
like 30 years ago. Horrible. Horrible to contemplate.
Dangerous. We
Yeah.
were dangerous. Very dangerous.
So, my God. Yeah, so Karen, that's kind of what I'm saying. It boils down to is experiencing your own reality, not what some outside expert has sketched out as the proper way to be human or something, which is called spirituality or whatever. That's not a goal. The goal is to be it all. If you can manage that, mazel tov, that's a really big happening. And it requires crossing a cavern of fear. Of course it does. That's what's being discussed here. Martina's discussed it before in writing on the.
Now she's talking.
And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with our animal reluctance to be a non-survivor, with our human understanding that death is there, whatever you think it is. It's definitely, it's definitely the end of this life as we know it. My experience is like John's. I've been in this place of induced, I won't even say emptiness, because it's not empty, it's just not there.
Sorry.
We're struggling here. Just in my office chair. Shit. So, yeah, I think you really get that, Karen. All we can do is be, not meet up with some expectations. The other question that arose is, yes, you have to meet certain expectations, otherwise they lock you up. You need your ego. That's what the ego is, the part that takes care of that shit. But that's not you. That's just a segment of oneself. The real myself goes outward into the entire universe. We all know this in our hearts. It's not like Robert knows it and no one else does. We all know that. We all know there's actually no limit to aliveness. We don't know. Nobody's ever found a limit to it. It grows everywhere. Like, I used to dive a lot. I was fascinated with undersea. I spent plenty of time underwater. But some really deep, beyond human depths, these robot vehicles have dived to very deep depths where there's boiling water coming out of vents in the earth. And right at the mouth of that stream of boiling water is a life form that never gets any rays of the sun, not at all, and is in boiling hot water. That's life. Any place that it can get a grip, any niche that can be filled, it is filled, right? And that's also true on this level, the level of understanding, my understanding of life. We all have one. It's like having a navel. If you're human, you have a picture of some kind. And that picture is an individual snapshot. No one else's can be yours. People have been writing a lot on my book page about what's the difference between you and Adyashanti. He seems to be saying the same thing you are. And what I said is, that's wrong for one thing. There's plenty we would disagree about, but you know, he might be a nice guy. I might have a beer with him or something, but he wouldn't have a beer. And actually, at this point, I wouldn't either. So we'd have a glass of tea. That's what I mean. It goes quick. You know, get it while it's hot. That's my advice there, Karen. Just get it while you got it. Not someone else's. No one else has a right to your life. That's what they call in Mexico a chupacabra, a vampire. No one has the right, not your parents, not anybody. They have no right to suck off your fucking life. You only get one, and you're going to suffer a lot to have it in one way or another, and probably in more than one way. It's my true confession. On the other hand, at least you have a life. That's what it boils down to, in my estimation. In that understanding, I'm a little bit like the Buddha, although I'm not an imitator, when he said that essentially to exist is to suffer. Then he said there's a way out of that suffering. and kind of stated what it was. And the Buddhists misunderstood it a lot, and now it's become an industry along with Vedanta, non-duality. These are industries now. It's what John was talking about in regard to Ramana Maharshi. You know, Ramana Maharshi was a real cool cat. He reminded me a lot of myself. He loved to hug animals. I love that too. I'm a real animal hugger. I get a great vibration from hugging our donkeys. It's beautiful to hold them around the neck, put your face up against their head. It's beautiful. You get such a great hit of understanding of a different point of view. And we have a donkey within us as humans. That's the cool part. As humans, we have lived through all these stages in our evolution. And our animal nature is quite refined by this point. And you know, we can appreciate perfume or the way that light hits the water, that we have beautiful minds that evolved. But as they evolved, our animal nature could not be banished. As the Romans used to say, you can throw nature out with a pitchfork, but she'll always come back again. So humanity, fearing personal extinction, which probably, as John and I kind of agree on, is likely what's going to happen at the end of this little, the end of this tune that's playing called Myself. When that really comes to an end, that's probably the end. And so there's no destination. There's only living of it. It's not going anywhere and it's not becoming anything. There's nothing for it to become. There's no achievement that myself owes anyone, not even myself. There's no debt to be paid, is what I'm saying. There's only this reality, this one reality that's taking place on the screen behind me, breath on my neck, you guys at the top of the screen. This is me in this moment. And we're totally subject to events. This is what John knows, and I know, and Tanya knows, and other people who have had NDEs and been on the gurney, you know, and all this. If you ever have that experience and you go to a near death, I watched Katanya do it several times, be in a coma and all that. When you come back from that, and non-involuntary, it's not like she was taking drugs or something and ended up in the gurney. These were allergic events and a couple of heart events. So when you come back from that, you don't really have any more questions. There are no more questions. You only have the ability to live this. And that's an ego death. But you don't do it by stomping on your ego in this totally rude, crude. It's like the spirituality is like the Donald Trump approach. Just call it bad names and then stomp it to death. You know, it's just terrible. That's not what we're expected to do, in my view, whatsoever. I'm only speaking for myself, but when I realized my nakedness and vulnerability, which is the same as awakening, and understanding that you're alone, there's no one with whom you can share your birth or your death. No one. There never was and there never will be. That's what you do alone. And so this dance here that we're all involved in, this is a beautiful dance, but as John will tell you, it's very fleeting, it's temporary, you can't get a hold of it, you can't import anything from it. You cannot, if you try, you will only, as John was pointing out, befuddle yourself. Then you'll be lost because you'll be living to repeat something, you'll be dead because you'll be living to repeat something that cannot be repeated. I've had many psychedelic experiences. I used to eat peyote every day. When Katanya met me, I was playing in a rock and roll band and ate peyote for breakfast every morning. And
Yeah,
a
good.
doctor friend has injected me in the veins with ketamine, which is a very profound psychedelic experience. You're entirely disembodied, but you're conscious. But there's no bodily awareness at all. It's pure space. But you're there as an observer. I had that one. We went to the San Juan Mountains in South Oaxaca and stayed up there for a week. And I had 2 mushroom trips with these intense mushrooms. They're supposed to be the most intense mushrooms on the planet that grow in those hills. And on the second trip, we had been hiking around up there and came upon some kind of Mexican Rastas. And it brought us into their little village. And this guy gave me this giant mushroom. It was really this big, it was huge. Never seen it. It was 4 times the size of any psychedelic mushroom I'd ever seen. And he said, "This is the grandfather mushroom. Take this and eat this." And I did. We went back to this cabin and I ate this grandfather mushroom, man. And I'm suddenly, when it comes on, I'm in this vast chamber above me, and the chamber is morphing constantly in colors and shapes, geometric patterns. It's all flowing, and it all makes sense. I'm seeing this pattern, and there's some intelligence in it, see, in this trip. And then it all goes black, and yet I still see the pattern. And when I came back from this trip, I said to Katanya, she was just babysitting me on this one because I was going to eat this grandfather mushroom, you know. And we were in a room with a fireplace, open fireplace too. I came back from it and I said, wow, I saw the black on black. I saw the black on black. That's what we're calling emptiness. But I was there for it. You see, I was the observer. Then I was in my 60s at this time. Then I wanted to keep experimenting with psychedelics, so I got into this thing called Salvia divinorum. Yes? Anyone heard of Salvia divinorum? That was the most amazing trip of all. That was the most amazing trip of all. You smoke the concentrate, a very small amount, and the trip only lasts about 5 to 7 minutes. And you have to get the dosage right. The first 2 times I didn't get a big enough hit, but on the 3rd time I did. And what happened was any awareness of any physical awareness whatsoever was completely absent, completely absent. And I was staring at a ceiling fan above me. I was in this entire room. And I started shrinking until I was just a molecule on a piece of furniture in that room. And the thought came, they can't hold me here. And I dropped 1 level down. And now I was in another room very similar to the one I had just been in, like falling down through the floors of an apartment building, floor by floor. On each floor, I said, I shrunk and then said to myself, and they can't hold me here. And I descended another level. And this went on just for 7 minutes, I guess.
Yeah, it was. It was a long 7 minutes.
And yeah, I bet it was for you.
That was interesting.
So I kept dropping these levels. And finally I said, well, they can't hold me here. And yes, they could. And I woke up on the floor of our bedroom where we were conducting this experiment. It was really the most bizarre trip because there were times when the observer I don't really think was there, but I don't know how I would be reporting this if there weren't some observer there. But these are radical psychedelic trips. But the point I wanted to make to you, Karen, was, let me get this back if I can. There's a picture of everyone across the top of the screen that went away. You leaving, Katanya?
Yeah, I'll leave now.
Okay.
Really nice to see all of you. Really great.
I don't know how to do this.
You too.
Yeah, okay, there it is down the side. That's good. So what I was wanting to say, Karen, is those trips were instructive to me, but now they're meaningless. They're like yesterday's papers. Whatever I needed to learn from them, I learned at the time. And this moment, to me, is equally as miraculous as any other moment, because it's the only one I've got. And it sounds like a platitude. I know it is, and I hate to keep harping on it. But I think if you put that one together with what John says about impermanence and mortality, and shake that up together, pour that one over some ice, take mine without the olive, and just drink that down. And I think that's the message here. It's once upon a once, and it's fleeting. And the end is usually difficult and painful. So now is the time to get it, which means it right now, not some attainment that you don't have right now. You have this right now, is what I'm saying. And I know that sounds like spiritual teaching, but it isn't. It is not. I don't know what you have to do to be that way. I barely did anything myself. It just kind of happened. Honestly, I keep saying that, and everybody says, no, you did something. No, I did not do anything special. I'm an idiot just like all of us. I really mean that. And I'm a PhD and all that good shit, and I'm still an idiot when it comes to these matters. We all are, I say. Okay, who else wanted to speak? I did see hands up earlier. Okay, that's good, because I'm finding myself rather tired. So, if there's no further takers, I think I'd like to bring the meeting to a close with thanks to all.
Thank you, Robert.
Thanks very much, Robert.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Robert.
Beautiful. Thank you, Rob.
Much respect, Robert, for your sharing.
Thank you, Robert.
Truly.
Klaus, was that you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to close the meeting until you've had a chance to speak. I'm sorry I didn't notice you.
Oh, I haven't got much to say. I've been really alone a few days. It was sort of really hard. I wanted to talk to people, and the people I talked to, I felt they were projecting their own trouble onto me in a way. And I had to be careful. I sort of learned in this process not to complain about it to others, really. You know, I still did a bit, you know, but it doesn't really help. You just got to let it go, things. It's hard for me to let things go. I feel at peace right now, not like in the first meeting when I met you and the other ones. I was sort of really nervous. And things are sort of coming clear for me, but it's sort of it's like mist, like a mist sort of over me. It's sort of difficult to find a metaphor for it. I don't know, it's just happening. I enjoy this very much. I enjoy the people very much, to hear them speak. And I sort of feel I found my tribe. I'm not really learning anything new. I feel things confirmed that I already know, that I've known for a long time. And got me into trouble at times of speaking up because I can be very feisty. Yeah, I don't know what else to say, really. I don't know. I can't see. I've just got a picture in front of me. Just you looking at me, Robert. I think it's a photo. It's not moving.
But I'm here, Klaus. I just had my camera off.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's good that you spoke. Next time, I want you to jump in a little earlier. I was just about to end the meeting. Just happened you happened to say thank you, and that's when I realized that you were here.
I was a bit scared. That's all.
Yeah. Well, I think the last meeting, you got a lot of acceptance from others who saw themselves in what you were talking about. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think you could relax a bit now and just understand that there are a lot of people here who actually get you.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I feel it. It's not seeing it. I feel it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So I realize that you're feeling quite alone.
Not at the moment, but I've had I got to go every 2 months. I got to go to Toowoomba for a checkup because I got a blood cancer of some sort, and I was really happy the day when I went down there. And I've said to people, I don't give a fuck, whether I die or not, really, and I mean that. And some people, they doubt that and they sort of play with me. But anyway, the report was good, everything is stable with me. And, with the type that I've got, I can get still into a reasonably old age with that, I'm told. I'm 72 now, so I'm well on the way.
Well, today is my last day of being 72, so we just overlapped. Tomorrow's my birthday, so this is my last day of being 72.
Okay, well, you're a bit in front of me then.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yes. So.
No, I don't really care much about my birthday or anything like that. I never really have, but if people find out, they usually do.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I'm glad you checked in, Klaus.
Me too. I didn't sleep. I was awake a few hours before, and I started reading the chapter 2 again. I've read it before, but I haven't read the complete book yet. And I just find my suspicions sort of confirmed of what I'm sort of reading in a way. And in places you can't really talk about that, Like, I was a born-again Christian for 25 years and sort of led the Christian life, with a family and 4 children. And I defected out of that in 2006 when my marriage was over, and I moved to Warwick, just a country town a bit away from the coast, about 2 hours from the coast. And I ran into an old pastor of mine in a McDonald's in Toowoomba, and I wanted to see him. He sort of just turned up and said hello. And I said, I'm not a Christian anymore, Jeff. And he said to me, yeah, but Jesus died for your sin. I said, I don't believe that anymore either. And that's just how it is for me now. I don't really believe any of that stuff, but I sort of, where I'm living, there is sort of people doing massage and, similar to the lady maybe that is in Tasmania that was on your Facebook site and that, you know, and I have sort of I've been part of a group, you know, going to meetings there, and there was a man there doing guided meditations. And in a way, I can't really stand them, you know, I can't stand sort of being superimposed in my mind by someone else in a way, you know. And maybe it's a defect, I don't know, but I just asked if I could leave.
No, I wouldn't say that's a defect. I would just say you don't need that, but someone else might. You know.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I just want to interject at that point. You know, other people have their ways, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
They didn't choose their way. They didn't choose their way any more than I chose mine or you chose yours. That's just that. That's just
that is true. You really made that clear in your book many times, and well, that is sort of a real. That's a real comfort for me, in a way. That really helped me to sort of to read that. You know.
Yeah. Yes, I would think so, because that's really the birth of self-compassion. You understand. You really had no choice. It's a very people are afraid of that because they consider it humiliating. It is not humiliating, it is humbling, and that's not the same. And if you could distinguish humiliating from humbling, everything would really be okay, because we don't really mind being humbled. A lot of us really need it and we want it. But we don't want to be humiliated in the process. I know I fucking don't.
I don't like it much either.
That's right. So that's why the spiritual groups are hard for a guy like you. I really get that. You have a brain for one thing.
Oh, I've done a lot of that. You can see my book bloody list in the back of me down there, you know, and Jesus, like, geez, I wasted some bloody money on all that shit, you know, really, in a way. And the way you sort of talk about, like, my argument is too, like, in Toowoomba, I went to visit a few friends when I went there to the hospital on Friday, and one of us, a friend who is in the Lutheran church, he was sort of like a pastor in there, and he had a big house where he had sort of people coming off dope, ice and things like that. And he also sort of was a father to my son. He was living alone in Toowoomba when we sort of split up. That's what his choice was. And then at one point, my friend, he became really passionate. You know, there was another guy there that wanted some advice for him regarding. He just came out of prison, and I just really, I just watched it, you know, and I could see myself actually in him, you know, quite some years ago, you know, being all excited about all this religious sort of stuff, you know, and at the same time, my friend, he is really, in all of this, he is in severe depression. And anyway, I don't want to go on about all this, you know. But I'm just watching, and I can sort of see, you know, in my own life what happened, you know, and I can see it happening in someone else's life, and there's not much I can do about it, just being a friend, really.
Yes, I can understand that.
And they have their opinion about me too, you know, because like if you sort of go against the doctrine of Jesus died for your sins, you know, you're worse than the devil. In many of them, you know, you're much worse than the devil. So I don't really say that. I only say that when I feel that it's important for me to make a statement like that. Otherwise, I don't go there.
Okay, I get that. I really understand that. And you spent a long time in the church. Repeating the rituals and all that, so you know what you're talking about, and you're just expressing your understanding, your particular way of seeing this. But that's not really allowed culturally. The culture sets up a system of rewards and punishments. Some of them are explicit laws and such. You do this and you go to prison for however many years. And then implicit is where most of them are. It's things you will do that will garner the disapproval of your neighbors. And some of them make real sense, like don't take a shit on a neighbor's lawn or something obvious. But if you do that, you won't have any neighbors. but a lot of what's being offered up in that way, Klaus, is not an obvious thing like don't take a shit on the neighbor's lawn. A lot of these are moral strictures that come from nowhere. They just come from nowhere. Like, God doesn't like gays. In fact, he doesn't like anything you do with your clothes off. He just doesn't like it. This kind of bullshit, you have to be in rebellion against that at some point in your life. If that was imposed upon you, there'll definitely be a period of rebellion.
Yeah.
It's necessary to clear the decks, yes.
In 1993, we sold up on the coast when I was married. I found a little Pentecostal church in Toowoomba that I sort of liked. And we went down there, and it was the end of me and our marriage as well, too. And the pastor sort of was not happy with me. I couldn't please him, really. Like, there was always something wrong with me down there, and I decided to go somewhere else. So I was really upset about that, but I couldn't stay there. But my wife stayed there with the kids, and then I went to another big sort of Pentecostal church, and I was in so much pain that I sort of started dancing in the worship music, and some people liked it, and others didn't like it. But I was sort of expressing my pain in a way. My love for God. And, you know, whatever that is, I don't know. You know, I don't know whether there is anything like that. I don't know. But that sort of, it put me into a space almost like a trance, you know. And then my ego sort of liked to run with that too, you know, of thinking I'm more spiritual than the others that didn't express their love for God and all that, you know. But all that sort of stuff is now gone, and I still like dancing.
You know, that's great. I'm glad you enjoyed the book, Klaus, and I'm glad you can come here and express yourself among people who know what you're talking about. It's helpful. I know.
It is beautiful. That's what I like so much. You know, I expressed last time when I seen you that I sort of, in a way, I looked for this all my life, you know. And in a way, like, you know, life just goes on, you know. This is just not it, you know. That just moves for each one of us that are here, you know. That just life just goes on. It's got to be eaten as it presents itself. And that is not easy sometimes. The father of a friend of mine passed away a few days ago, and I went to see him a few days before he died, and I felt not to go there anymore because there was sort of concern that they wanted to leave him longer, and I thought, you know, he really wanted to go. That's what I sort of felt, you know, and I stayed there. It was not my place. They were a big family and other people needed to be with him. And then I was not close to my friend's father, but I liked him and I tried to make conversation, but we were not the same, you know. Yeah.
I think it was John Troy who quoted someone earlier about let the dead bury the dead. Was that you, John?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was John.
Yeah.
It was John.
Yeah, you know, I could see how someone could think that that was cruel or unfeeling, but actually it isn't. It isn't. That's what has to happen. And meanwhile, we're alive here. We are this aliveness. That's what we are. We're this aliveness unfolding in a mysterious way that no one can define or put in a frame. At all. At all. And we can sit in judgment on it the way we've been taught to, but there is, I say, and this is what I mean by personal confession, because I bet I get some pushback on this one soon. But I'm saying that it doesn't always have to be that way. That's all I'm saying. I understand compulsion and anxiety very well. I'm human just like anyone else. I get it. But it doesn't have to be that way. The
I
thing
do
is,
too.
how it gets to not be that way is not something that another human being can teach you. It's what you have to find, your own ground of being. You have to find the ground of being where you can reside. It's like earlier, Paul Cannell, when you were talking about this feeling about almost like familial obligations, but then taking it to a deeper place where they weren't obligatory, they were what's happening. And you embrace that. See, that's there's where the freedom is. In a gesture like that, is we're not denying that we have all these drives and compulsions. Of course we have them. I did not invent Robert Saltzman, this Jewish kid from New York. No, I did not. And I wasn't there in Bordeaux deciding which body to inherit next. My next reincarnation will be this kid, No. You see, and then when we live this on that level, that's what I call the amusement park. That's the hypnotic trance out there, and everybody goes, "Oh yeah, okay."
Yeah.
You see this?
John Troy, he sort of picked up on that little statue on the bookshelf of Rick Archer sort of thing, and that was before I really met you guys, really. I sort of looked at that too, and I had the same impression. I thought, this guy is a collector of all these sort of specimens. I don't know, I don't want to be critical.
Yeah, he definitely.
But that's the feeling I had, and you are just another specimen being taken into the loop.
You said it, brother. He collected me. But Rick is a nice guy, I get it. He has a very narrow point of view from the one we're discussing here. He doesn't really get that.
Yeah.
But he's a really nice guy. That's the thing. I really like him.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah,
I do. He's a sweetheart. He really is. Because I had this other interviewer, John Lee Kay, and he was as demanding of explanations from me as Rick was, and also a little nasty about it. But it goes with the territory. You just have to say the magic word. So awake. And they go, oh yeah, really? This is absurd. We're all awake. That's what I'm trying to say. This is awakeness that we're all indulging in here. If we can only just see that, so much of this longing for the future would just disappear. Just see that. You're awake now. Awake is what's hearing these words. Awake is what's making sense of these words. You're not doing
I live
that.
in this living. I live.
You're not doing that. There's no you creating this world. Yes, you're creating it the way that the traditions say it, but if you think that there's some you creating it, you misunderstand what's being said. What they mean is you're seeing this world from a point of view. It's inevitable. I'm seeing it from the point of view of a human being on one level as opposed to, say, a gorilla. And I'm seeing it as a person with a bunch of experiences that come from being born at a certain time into a certain race identified body and a certain gender and every other fucking thing. And you whip it all together and that's your cocktail and you've got to drink it. But you didn't mix it up. You did not pour in the ingredients. That came from outside. And that's emptiness. When you realize there's no fixed you. It's a concoction, but you didn't write the recipe. You're living the recipe.
Yeah, I don't really know. I don't really try to dwell on that. I used to jargonize things a bit. Like another thing that I've sort of noticed that you say about yourself, and I've sort of said it about myself too, and in another group once, and it was not really appreciated because they thought that as I was making myself an equal with the person that was sort of facilitating it, that was not really my motive. I was just expressing my experience of how it is for me. like at times just words just do bubble up for me, and I sort of say them, you know, and I think a bit. I still have filters there as well too, you know, so I don't really unnecessarily upset. Yeah. I'm here in Warwick. I've lived here I came here in 2006. I've been here 12 years, built my house and blah, blah. And then I became part of a ping pong group, you know, playing table tennis, and do that twice a week. And I took my book down there the other day, you know, your book, for the 10,000 Things. And I read him that bit of George Carlin down there, because that really cracks me up, you know, you know, you get that. I'm not very good in quoting and remembering things.
It's called "I Want to Live My Life Backwards."
Backward, that's it. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And I find that so funny.
I'll start out as a corpse, then I'll be in an old person's home, and then I'll start to feel better and better until I'm too young for the old person's home, and I'm out there retired. And I'm out playing golf, and I've got my gold watch, but then I don't feel like hanging out on the golf course. I've got things to do. And I'm in my 40s and in my 30s, filled with energy.
That's it.
He says, see, now I'm in school, and I'm getting younger and younger. Now I'm a baby crawling on the floor, and then I'm in the womb, and wow, it ends with an orgasm. That was his bit.
Yeah. Well, it still might up like an orgasm.
I think so. If it has to end at all, let it end as the last orgasm. The last little bit. I don't know. I don't know either. I don't think we really get to decide.
No.
See, I think the thing that's very beautiful about the 10,000 Things book is it takes the decision out of your hands. I think that's very beautiful. Constantly throughout the book, you're brought to the notion that you're not the doer. You're not making this, that your ideas are just ideas. They came from somewhere you don't know anything about. This personality you have was never chosen. It just is what it is. It can't be improved upon. To get back to a question that came up earlier, David, about who's in control here. There is control. There's the pressures of survival in a authoritarian culture. We all feel that. We pay our taxes, for example. Not entirely voluntarily, but because we have to. And we'll be punished if we don't. And anyone who works for a living is in that model. And even if you are retired, when you spend your money at the market, they extract the tax on everything you buy, take the money away from you right at the cash register. So we're all subject to these pressures. So freedom can't be pretending that those pressures don't exist. I've just taken this one metaphor, a finance metaphor, but it applies to any facet of life. We are subject to those pressures, and this is what U.G. Krishnamurti was pointing out. I really like this part of what he had to say. That's reality. If you behave as if that is not real, you'll end up in the funny farm singing Looney Tunes and merry melodies. That's the way he put it. That is the cop on the corner is reality. If you do the wrong thing, you'll find it out. You'll be behind bars. That will be your reality. And I think in this non-duality idea, it's all the same, and that is not true. Anybody who thinks that has misunderstood personhood entirely. They're trying to erase it. And that's not, I'm saying, Klaus or anyone else. It's not about that. It's about self-acceptance, not erasure, not self-erasure. It's about self-acceptance. Just find your ground of your own being, whatever it is. So I'm getting pretty tired. There's a couple of hands up. John Troy, you raised your hand. Let you speak. You're still there.
I'm still here. It was Jesus who said, "Let the dead bury the dead," supposedly.
Can you repeat that? I couldn't get it.
It was Jesus supposedly who said, "Let the dead bury the dead."
Oh, yes, that's a great quote. Let the dead bury the dead. That's it. It doesn't mean you don't attend the funeral. It's not what it means. And you might attend the funeral, but you're not going to be in mourning exactly when you attend it. You may feel sad and you may be in grief-stricken, but there'll be a part of you that sees all of that. And that's what this entire thing is about. This is not spiritual teaching. See, this is just old age, basically. This is what happens as you draw closer to the finish line and your body is telling you, you're ill, man. You're not going to go on that much longer. See, I've got that message. So that's cool. I'm not in mourning. It's difficult at times because there's pain involved. But apart from that, this is one of the times of self-expression in a rather artistic life. This is one of the best times in that life, if not the best. I really feel that way. And I've had the opportunity to be an artist in all of this. And it's beautiful. And it's totally mortal and completely vulnerable and looks for nothing. As John was saying, it's not even nothing. It's just not there at all. It's impossible to describe a space that empty. It's impossible. It's not empty or not empty. It's not even, it has no characteristics. It's just not, it's non-existent, except it isn't non-existent because that's a characteristic. It's something that's indescribable. It's a dead zone. And see, that is actually within us. But not by actually, maybe you need full anesthesia or nirvikalpa samadhi or whatever it is. Or as Karen was talking about, ayahuasca or whatever, those experiences, I'm not saying those experiences are meaningless. But what I'm saying is that that same experience, Karen, is really available. And Paul, is really available in this moment, exactly as it was on the ayahuasca trip, precisely as it was. It won't be the same, but with the same degree of wonderment if you actually see that you're alive. And this is all occurring, and as far as you know, in your own mind only. You have no way of getting outside of yourself to see if this is a delusion, an illusion, one of these sci-fi stories of the Matrix or something. You have no way. We're that ignorant of what we are and what this is. That's how ignorant we are, abjectly. And that's what I am talking about in the 10,000 things that seems to put people on edge. That's a hard one. Some people, like the people here at the meeting, enjoy it, but it's a tough perspective because a lot of ambitions, let's say, will seem empty because there's no finish line where you take all the awards and present them and somebody gives you a grade. That's gone. And that's what religion and spirituality thrive upon. You're gaining merit, as the Buddhists like to say. So, for the day, anyone left to speak? In that case, thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Robert.
Sayonara.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you all.